He had $7 to his name. 3 days of starvation led to this one meal. But when he saw two strangers who couldn't pay for their coffee, he didn't hesitate. He gave them everything. What he didn't know was that these weren't ordinary strangers. They were millionaire developers in disguise, watching his every move. And what happened 72 hours later will make you cry. This
Let
story
me help
proves
you.
that kindness
Thank you,
isn't
dear.
just
That's
nice,
very kind
it's
of you.
powerful.
Service with a smile.
Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about a young man named David Rivers. Just 19 years old, working the night shift at Rosie's Diner on the corner of 5th Street. $7.50 an hour. Every single penny mattered in David's world. Picture this. It's 5:30 in the morning. No alarm clock needed. David's body knows when it's time to wake up. He slides out of bed quietly, careful not to disturb his grandmother sleeping in the next room. The floorboards creak under his feet, telling stories of a house that's seen better days. Paint peeling off the walls. Windows held together with tape. But his grandmother, sweet Nana Grace, keeps everything spotless. Being poor doesn't mean we can't have pride, she always says. David pulls on yesterday's jeans. Checks his pocket. $4.23. Enough for the bus to work. Not enough for the ride back home. That means walking 3 miles after his shift ends. But that's okay. He's walked further for less. The walk to Rosie's Diner takes him through different worlds. Past houses with perfect gardens and shiny cars. Past apartment buildings where hope seems to have packed up and left years ago. Past the old factory that closed down, leaving nothing but empty promises and broken dreams. Rosie's Diner glows like a lighthouse in the early morning darkness. Inside, the owner, Tom, is already prepping for breakfast rush. Tom doesn't say much, but there's respect there. He knows David shows up every single day. Works harder than people twice his age. Never complains. David's hands move through the same routine. Stack of dirty plates. Hot, soapy water.
Scrub. Rinse. Stack. Repeat. His hands are rough now.
Scarred from months of this work. Sometimes he wonders what college students' hands look like. Probably softer. Hands that hold textbooks instead of dish scrubbers. Through the small window above the sink, David watches people come and go. Families heading to school. Construction workers grabbing quick coffee. Business people in expensive suits talking on phones. All of them living lives he can only imagine. At 8 o'clock, his shift ends. Time for school. Lincoln High sits like a tired giant on the east side of town. The building needs repairs. The computers are ancient. Half the lockers don't even work anymore. But inside these walls, David transforms. Here, he's not just the dishwasher. He's the kid with perfect grades who helps other students understand algebra during lunch break. Mrs. Robertson, his English teacher, sees something special in him. "David, you have a gift," she tells him one afternoon. "Have you thought about college?" College? That word feels like a foreign language. Kids from his neighborhood don't go to college. They get jobs right after high school, if they're lucky. But Mrs. Robertson keeps bringing him applications. Scholarship forms. Brochures showing campus buildings that look like castles. "I can't afford it," David tells her quietly. The numbers are impossible. Even with financial aid, it would take everything Nana Grace has and more. Dreams have a way of finding resources when the dreamer is worthy, Mrs. Robertson says with a knowing smile. During lunch, while other kids buy hot meals, David eats peanut butter sandwiches and studies those college brochures. Engineering programs. Business degrees. The costs make his head spin. But he keeps looking anyway. After school, the cycle continues. More dishes at Rosie's Diner. The evening crowd is different. Families celebrating small victories. Elderly couples making their coffee last as long as possible just to have somewhere warm to sit. David notices everything. The way people count their change carefully. The way a kind word can light up someone's entire face. At home, Nana Grace waits in her old recliner. She's 71 but looks older. Diabetes. Heart problems. Medicine she can barely afford. But when David walks through that door, her face brightens like sunrise. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asks. Same question every evening. Good, Nana. Yours? Better now that you're home. They don't talk about the bills piling up. They don't talk about the doctor appointments she's been skipping. They don't talk about those college applications hidden in his backpack. Tonight, though, everything is about to change. For 3 whole days, David had been saving, not spending a single extra penny. No snacks after school. No soda at lunch. Walking both ways instead of taking the bus even once. All for one simple thing. Buying himself a real meal at Rosie's diner. It might not sound like much to you. Just a burger and fries. But for David, it meant something more. It meant sitting down like a regular customer instead of working behind the scenes. It meant choosing what he wanted to eat instead of settling for whatever was cheapest. For once, he wanted to feel like everyone else. Tonight was supposed to be that night. The November rain pounded against the diner windows like bullets. Angry rain that soaked through clothes in seconds. David finished wiping down his last table, his stomach growling with anticipation. At the pickup counter, his meal waited. A thick burger. Golden fries. The most beautiful thing he'd seen all week. But then he noticed something. Table 12. The corner booth, where couples usually sat on date nights. Tonight it held 2 people who looked completely out of place. An elderly couple, both dripping wet. The woman's silver hair hung in wet strands. Her expensive coat, even soaked through, probably cost more than David made in 2 months. The man sat straight despite his age, but his fancy suit clung to him like wet newspaper. They had ordered 2 coffees. Nothing else. And they'd been nursing those same cups for over an hour. David watched from behind the counter as the woman searched through her purse for the 5th time. Her movements grew more desperate with each search. She dumped everything onto the table. Tissues. Reading glasses. Breath mints. But no wallet. No money. Nothing. She whispered something to her husband, her voice tight with panic. He patted his coat pockets. Then his pants pockets. Then back to his coat again. The shake of his head said everything. "I don't understand," the woman said, loud enough for David to hear. "I'm certain I had it when we left." Sarah, the evening waitress, approached their table slowly. She'd worked at Rosie's long enough to recognize trouble. Nice people in a bad situation. The kind that breaks your heart, but doesn't pay bills. "Folks, I'm sorry to bother you." Sarah held up their check like it might bite her. "But..." The woman's face crumbled. "We're so embarrassed. We seem to have lost our wallet. I don't know how. This has never happened before." Through bits of their conversation, David pieced together their story. Their car broke down on the highway 2 miles from the nearest exit. They walked through the storm, looking for help, hoping to call their son from the diner's payphone. But the payphone hasn't worked in months. The man spoke with a voice that carried authority even in defeat. "Perhaps we could leave something as collateral? I have my watch. My wife has some important papers." "I'm sorry," Sarah interrupted gently. "Tom has a strict policy. No exceptions." Tom himself appeared from the kitchen, arms crossed. He wasn't mean, just practical. The diner barely made enough money to stay open. Free meals, even for desperate elderly folks, couldn't happen. "Look, I wish I could help," Tom said, his voice softer than his expression. "But..." "We understand," the man said quickly, standing from the booth. "Come, Elizabeth. We'll figure something out." Elizabeth clutched a worn leather folder against her chest like a shield. For just a moment, as she stood, David saw what was inside. Official-looking documents. Certificates with fancy seals. And something with a silver logo that seemed familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen it. The couple moved toward the door, their dignity intact, but their pride clearly wounded. Outside, the storm raged harder. Lightning lit up the empty parking lot where their broken-down car waited in the rain. "They can't go back out there," Sarah whispered, watching through the window. "Not at their age. Not in this weather." But Tom had already turned away. Back to his kitchen. Back to the business of survival. David looked at his untouched meal on the counter. The burger still warm. The fries still crispy. 3 days of sacrifice, sitting there while 2 strangers faced humiliation. The elderly couple reached the door. The man's hand touched the handle. Elizabeth looked back one last time at the warm diner they were about to leave. That's when David made his choice. David didn't think. His feet just moved. His meal sat on the counter, still waiting, still representing 3 days of careful sacrifice. But watching Elizabeth's shoulders slump as she faced that storm, something inside him simply decided. "Sarah," he called out, crossing the diner in quick steps. "Wait." The elderly couple turned. Elizabeth's eyes were red, whether from embarrassment or the cold rain. David couldn't tell. The man's pale blue eyes locked onto him with startling intensity. "Folks," David said, reaching their table with his tray. "This one's on me tonight." Silence hung in the air. Elizabeth blinked rapidly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's incredibly kind, but we couldn't possibly."
Please.
David set the burger and fries in front of them, then slid into the booth without invitation. "My grandmother always says kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away." The man's gaze never left David's face. Something flickered behind those pale eyes. "Son, this is your meal. You worked for this. And I can work for another one. Can you call about your car?" As Sarah bustled away to help with the phone, David introduced himself. "I'm David, by the way. David Rivers." "William," the man said, extending a hand that felt surprisingly strong. "William Foster. And this is my wife, Elizabeth." Elizabeth's hands trembled as she reached for a fry. "We haven't eaten since breakfast," she admitted quietly. "Our car broke down on Highway 47. We walked here in the rain. We thought we had our wallet, but—" She trailed off, embarrassed. "Cars break down," David said simply. "Happens to everyone." William studied him with those penetrating eyes. "You work here? After school?" "After school and weekends. Saving for college." David shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Trying to, anyway." "What do you want to study?" "Business administration, maybe. Something that could help my neighborhood." The dream felt silly saying it out loud. "Sounds impossible, probably." "Not impossible at all." William's voice carried unexpected authority. "Tell me about your neighborhood." It was an odd question from a stranded traveler, but David found himself answering. "Lincoln High needs better computers. The neighborhood could use a medical clinic. People travel across town for basic health care. And there's this old factory that's been empty for years. Could be something useful." William and Elizabeth exchanged a glance. She clutched her leather folder tighter, and again David glimpsed that silver logo. Sarah returned with news. "Mechanic's on his way. Should be here in 20 minutes. "Thank you," William said, then turned back to David. "What did you say your full name was?" "David Rivers." William pulled out an expensive card holder, paused, then reached for a napkin instead. He wrote carefully on it. "David Rivers," he repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "And your address?" The question seemed oddly formal, but David gave it. 892 Oak Street. Elizabeth whispered something urgent to her husband, gesturing toward her folder. William nodded and turned back to David. "Son." William's tone shifted to something almost ceremonial. "What you did tonight, giving up your meal for complete strangers, tells me everything I need to know about your character." "It's just food," David protested. "You needed it more than I did." "Just food." William smiled, but something behind it made David feel like he was missing something important. "Elizabeth, show him." Elizabeth hesitated, then opened her folder slightly. Inside, David glimpsed official documents, certificates with elaborate seals, and architectural blueprints. Everything bore that same silver logo. "We're not just stranded travelers," Elizabeth said carefully. "We're here on business. Very important business." Before David could ask what kind of business, headlights cut through the rain. A tow truck rumbled into the parking lot. William stood, straightening to his full height. In the diner's harsh light, his entire bearing transformed. Gone was the helpless elderly man. In his place stood someone who clearly expected to be listened to, respected, obeyed. The mechanic entered, and William's voice was crisp, businesslike. "How quickly can you have it running?" "Well, sir, depends on what's wrong." Money is not an issue, William interrupted. Whatever it takes. David blinked. 30 minutes ago, this man couldn't afford coffee. Now he was saying money was no object. As they prepared to leave, William placed a firm hand on David's shoulder. Son, you've given us something far more valuable than a meal tonight. And I want you to know, we don't forget kindness. He slipped the napkin with David's information into his coat pocket like it was a precious document. Elizabeth stepped forward, still clutching her folder. David, what you did tonight means more than you can possibly imagine. It was just, David began. It was character, William interrupted. Pure, unselfish character. The kind that's rarer than diamonds. As they headed toward the door, William turned back one final time. We'll be in touch. Something in his voice made it sound less like a polite goodbye and more like a promise. The car started immediately. As the luxury vehicle disappeared into the night, David sat alone in the empty diner, staring at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. Something extraordinary just happened. He just couldn't figure out what. What David didn't know was that William was already on his phone making calls that would change everything. The first call, I need complete background checks and academic records for David Rivers. The second call, draft the partnership papers. I think we found him. The third call would happen tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock to the principal of Lincoln High School. Before the story continues, subscribe. These stories are written to change lives. The next morning, David arrived at Lincoln High to find people staring at him, whispering. Teachers paused in hallways to watch him pass. Then the announcement crackled over the intercom. David Rivers, please report to the principal's office immediately. In 4 years at Lincoln High, David had never been called to the principal's office. Not once. Through the glass windows, he saw Principal Anderson talking to two figures. An elderly couple in expensive clothes. William and Elizabeth. But they weren't the desperate travelers from last night. William's posture commanded attention. Elizabeth's designer coat was immaculate, and spread across the principal's desk were official documents bearing that same silver logo. David's legs felt unsteady as he entered. William stood up. Not the frail, stranded man from Rosie's diner, but someone who commanded rooms with his presence. Hello again, son. David's mouth went dry. You're William Foster, the real estate developer. I am. William's smile was warm but calculating. And last night you bought dinner for one of the wealthiest developers in the state. The question is, why? The room spun. You needed help. It didn't matter who you were. Exactly. Elizabeth spoke, her voice carrying authority. William, show him. Principal Anderson slid a thick folder across his desk. David's school photo was clipped to the cover. David Rivers, character assessment. We've been researching you for 72 hours, William explained, opening the folder. Page after page of documentation. Academic transcripts. Work evaluations from Tom. Character references from teachers. Even photographs of David helping elderly neighbors with groceries. David stared at the papers. You've been watching me? We've been evaluating you, Elizabeth corrected gently. Foster Development is launching our most ambitious project ever, a comprehensive neighborhood revitalization initiative. We need someone local. Someone who understands real hardship, but maintains hope. Someone whose character we can absolutely trust. William continued, reading from the reports. Straight A's despite working 25 hours weekly. Teachers describe you as remarkably mature and genuinely compassionate. Your boss says you're the most reliable employee he's ever had. Mrs. Chun from the corner market mentions you help stock her shelves every week without being asked. Elizabeth added, Mr. Patterson says you shovel his driveway every winter and refuse payment. The librarian notes you tutor struggling students during lunch. Your name came up repeatedly as someone who embodies the values we're looking for. David felt like he was watching this happen to someone else. The broken-down car? Staged, Williams said matter-of-factly. We needed to create a situation where you could choose kindness or indifference, where the choice would cost you something you valued. The lost wallet? Elizabeth patted her coat pocket. Safe the entire time. The betrayal hit hard. You lied to me. We created a scenario, William corrected. What we wanted to see was authentic. How you'd respond when you thought no one was watching. When there was nothing in it for you. Principal Anderson leaned forward. David, they're offering you opportunities that could change your life. Elizabeth opened her leather folder, revealing documents that made David's breath catch. University logos. Legal letterhead. Financial statements with impossible numbers. A full scholarship to any accredited university you choose, William began. Tuition, room, board, books, living expenses. For years completely covered. During summers, you'll intern directly with our development firm, Elizabeth continued. Learning urban planning, community development, real estate management. And after graduation, William smiled. You return here as assistant director of our newest community development project. 2 years of training. Then, if both parties agree, you become director. David looked around the room. You want me to run a development project? We want you to help us build it first. William spread architectural blueprints across the desk. Detailed plans for a gleaming facility. The David Rivers Community Center. You want to name it after me? We want you to be its founding director, William clarified. This represents a $15 million investment in your neighborhood. But we don't just write checks and disappear. We partner with local leaders who share our vision. $15 million. More money than everyone on Oak Street had seen combined. Why me? Because transformation has to come from within, Elizabeth explained. We can build buildings and fund programs. But authentic change requires someone who genuinely loves their community despite its problems. William nodded. Someone who sees potential instead of just poverty. Someone who gives away their last meal to strangers because it's the right thing to do. The deception still stung. The whole thing was fake. The test was real, William said firmly. Your response was real. Your character was real. Those are the only things that matter. Elizabeth added, we've funded hundreds of projects, but we've never offered full partnership to someone your age. You'd be the youngest director in our company's history. William pulled out his real business card, heavy stock with a silver logo embossed. Take 2 weeks to think about it. Visit our other community centers. Talk to people whose lives we've changed. Make sure this aligns with your vision. As he handed David the card, William's expression softened. And son, regardless of what you decide about the center, your college tuition is covered. What you did last night deserves recognition no matter what. David stared at the card, at the blueprints, at the impossible opportunity. There's one condition, Elizabeth said seriously. You can't do this for money or recognition. You have to genuinely want to serve your community. That's the only way it works. Outside, students moved through ordinary days while David sat in a room where his entire future was being rewritten.
This wasn't just about him.
It was about everyone he'd ever tried to help. Everyone who'd ever believed that kindness matters even when no one is watching. This was about proving that sometimes, just sometimes, good people really do win. 20 months later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Where the abandoned factory once stood, the David Rivers Community Center rose like a promise kept. Modern glass reflected morning sunlight. Architecture that honored the neighborhood's history while pointing toward its future. And everywhere, people moved with purpose. David, now 21 and a junior at State University studying urban development, spent his spring break overseeing the center's daily operations. He carried himself with quiet confidence now, but his eyes still held that same kindness that caught William's attention. The medical clinic opened 8 months ago and immediately changed lives. Dr. Patel had already seen over 900 patients. Nana Grace was among them, her diabetes controlled, her heart monitored, her medicine finally affordable. Baby, Nana Grace said, sitting on their newly renovated porch, you see that sign? The banner read, David Rivers Community Center, building tomorrow together. Still feels surreal, David admitted. That's the name of the young man you became when you chose kindness over hunger. Inside the center, the computer lab buzzed with life. 40 adults learning skills that led to actual jobs. Mrs. Chun discovered a talent for website design. Sarah from Rosie's Diner enrolled in accounting courses and started her own bookkeeping business. The job training programs exceeded every projection. Welding, healthcare administration, digital marketing, all leading to certifications that employers wanted. Lincoln High's test scores jumped 19% in the first year. Students now had modern computers, quiet study spaces, and mentors who looked like them and understood their struggles. The center's commercial kitchen became something beautiful. Tom from Rosie's Diner expanded his catering operation, hiring 8 people from the training program. Local businesses started buying from neighborhood suppliers again. News coverage brought state attention. The governor visited, praising the Foster Rivers partnership model. This proves that sustainable change requires local leadership supported by strategic investment. But the real stories happen quietly. Elderly residents getting regular checkups. Teenagers choosing study groups over street corners. Small businesses launching. Jobs being created. Hope returning to streets that had forgotten what it looked like. Crime dropped 21% in the first year. Not because of police, but because people had better things to do. William and Elizabeth attended every milestone, but always stood in the back, letting David and the community take center stage. At the anniversary celebration, David gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. This center exists because Mrs. Robertson believed in her students. Because Tom showed respect to a kid washing dishes. Because Nana Grace taught me that generosity grows when you share it. The applause echoed off the walls, but David noticed William wiping his eyes. A reporter asked afterward, "What's next for the center?" "Independence," David answered. "We're not creating dependency. We're building capacity. In 5 years, this community won't need us anymore. They'll be helping other communities instead." 6 months after that conversation, the difference became clear. The center's programs had generated 62 new jobs, launched 18 small businesses, and placed 94 people in careers outside the neighborhood. But the most important number was still one act of kindness that multiplied into thousands. Then came David's real test as a leader. One evening, Sarah from Rosie's Diner called him. "David, there's a family here. Their car broke down. They can't pay for their meal. I remembered what you did, and thought maybe." David didn't hesitate. "I'll be right there." At Rosie's Diner, a young family huddled in the corner booth. A father counting pocket change with shaking hands. A mother apologizing in broken English. 2 small children who looked scared and hungry. David approached with 2 meals. "This one's on me tonight." As they ate, he learned their story. Migrating for work. Car troubles. Skills but no connections. No way to prove their worth. "You know," David said thoughtfully, "we're always looking for good people at the community center." He pulled out his business card and wrote their names on the back, just as William once wrote his. "Carlos and Maria Santos," he said aloud, the same way William had once said his name. "We'll be in touch." 2 hours later, Carlos was reviewing job opportunities. Maria was discussing childcare positions. Their children were already making friends. That evening, William called. "How are things, Director Rivers?" "Good," David replied, watching Carlos help other students while Maria organized the children's area. "Really good. I finally understand what you told me." "What's that?" "Kindness is the only investment that always pays dividends." William chuckled. "And what's your return rate?" David looked at the thriving center, thought about Nana Grace's health, the jobs created, the lives touched, the hope restored. "Immeasurable," he said. That night, walking home past the community center that bore his name, David understood the truth. Transformation isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day, one act of kindness at a time. Because somewhere tonight, someone else is washing dishes after school, helping elderly neighbors, believing in possibilities others can't see. They're not waiting for permission to make a difference. They're already doing it, one heart at a time. What if your kindness could unlock someone's potential? What if a stranger's generosity could change your life? Think about one person who showed you unexpected kindness. Remember their story. Share that kindness with someone else. Because transformation starts with seeing the person, not their circumstances. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the Story Room for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons.